Morning, everybody. It's Joe Chaffee on this Friday, the 4th of January. Welcome, Patreon folks. Always good to see a nice crowd out in the morning. Uh, jump on this morning. There really isn't a whole lot new in the short and long range. Sometimes you get into these points where things seem to flow along relatively smoothly, especially when it comes to rain events, because if you're not dealing with any kind of snow issues or ice issues, and it's just a straight rain event, unless it's going to be something excessive that causes some flooding, it's not the biggest of big deals. Let's put it that way. And I think that's where we're at this weekend. Of course, today starting to see some high clouds filter in, and they'll continue to increase and thicken up as the day goes on. And we're going to also be dealing with some rain overnight into Saturday. There's some severe weather potential going on to the south. So I figured I'd start with that this morning. And this is the Storm Prediction Center's got marginal risk in eastern North Carolina and also in western Florida. Looks like from about just south of Tampa, St. Pete, northward. And we can see the expanding line of downpours and thunderstorms. There's nothing that looks terribly severe at this point. I suppose that the marginal risk is likely to lead to some isolated rather than widespread activity, but nonetheless, the risk is there and a general risk of thunderstorms going all the way up. There's also a bit of a batch of some heavy rains and possibly a couple of thunderstorms in the mix there in parts of southern Illinois. At least that's the way it's showing up on the radar. That's the upper low that's kind of arcing back. There's no cold air to speak of anywhere in the east. There will be some coming back over the weekend, but at least for now, it is zero as far as the cold air is concerned. So, watching the progress of this low over the next 24 to 48 hours that's coming up from the south. We'll show you the NAM model, the new NAM model from today. The idea, you get these upper lows, these vigorous upper lows. It isn't, as far as its translation on the surface, you really don't see all that much. It's 1,002 low there in eastern North Carolina. Just kind of has a weak surface profile. The pressure gradient tightens up a little bit tomorrow, but nothing really crazy. It'll just get breezy. And you can see the nature of the rain as it comes in during the early morning hours. You start to see it spread northward through North Carolina and into Virginia during this afternoon. It reaches D.C., Baltimore at about 5 o'clock or so, reaches Philadelphia at around 9, 10 o'clock. That lead band it's not the most impressive lead band of rain in the world, let's put it that way. And then it comes in, you start to get the surface low, which moves off the Delaware coast. And by tomorrow morning, it's sitting just near Cape May. And you've got this east-west arc of precip that runs from along the immediate coast, Long Island, back to New Jersey. And then you get a band of heavier rains that do develop during the day on Saturday, during the morning hours, and start to push northward into the Hudson Valley, northwestern New Jersey, and on up into northern Connecticut. And then, excuse me, and then that low pulls away to the northeast, starts to intensify. You start to get into a little bit of snow getting involved, but not until it gets all the way into New Brunswick and even Nova Scotia. Most of that is rain, maybe turns to snow at the end. You do have, with the strengthening low and high pressure that shows up in Minnesota on Sunday morning, again, a situation where, again, the pressure gradient on Sunday is going to be a bit on the tight side, so it will be breezy. We're going to see some snows up in northern New England and parts of upstate New York, a little bit of lake effect going on, but not a whole lot. And then we transition over to Monday, where the high already is moved into southeastern Canada, but it moves out. And now we have a warm front, cold front combination to deal with for later Monday night into Tuesday. I have to tell you, warm fronts warm fronts can be one of these things where you wind up getting a big thumped surprise where it snows pretty hard for a couple of hours. We saw an example of that to some degree back in November. And there are numerous examples of that occurring, along the way. But over the years. But there's also the other end of this where the warm front really doesn't do very much, and you really don't see much in the way of precip. So I'm leaning toward the idea that this is going to be more the second rather than the first, and the GFS is a little bit more um, responsive with this warm front. But even on today's run, the new run, the warm front action with this is more through well up into upstate New York and up into interior New England. I kind of think that much of the eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England zone is probably not going to see very much, if anything at all, with this. And then it's just really a weak frontal passage at the end of the day that comes through here for Tuesday morning. So it's quite possible that if you didn't realize what was going on, you wouldn't know the difference one way or the other. And I don't expect too much with that. So this looks pretty weak. And then we've got what is going to usher in the next shot of colder air. And we've seen this trend where the shots of colder air are going to be getting progressively colder and lasting a bit longer with each one that goes by. And here we have another low that is by Wednesday is sitting up in upstate New York. There'll be some snow inland there, maybe a few rain showers with a frontal passage here during Tuesday night, and then we'll start to see some colder air. There is, it's a stronger push than what we're seeing for Sunday into Monday, and the one that follows this should probably be even stronger still. I'm not. I didn't see anything in the overnight models that leads me to change my thinking of the last couple of days. This sort of methodical stair step process that we're seeing, and when we look at the upper air. Also, not too much has changed really. You've got this vigorous upper low. The flow just continues to be this sort of unrelenting fire hose across the Pacific. You're getting some pretty vigorous systems coming into the Pacific. But if you watch here starting on Saturday, just for as an example, you see if you look up in southeastern Canada, that's the northern jet at least trying to get involved. So when it does get involved, you do get these glancing shots of cold air, but they move out. And then here comes the next one. Now this one here, you'll notice the trough is deeper. The steepness of the ridge is higher going up into the west. So you've got more of a northwest flow coming into the western lakes. So this is telling you that the shot of cold air that follows for the middle of next week will be colder than the one that comes in Sunday night or Monday. I did not really notice anything in the long range with regards from last night, in last night's model run. Looking at the whole jet stream profile, I'm switching back to last night's model run at this point because we don't have enough of the new GFS. We're only out to 120 hours, but this trough for the middle of next week with cold air, it moves in, moves out, another ridge, and then another trough. And it's at that point that we're now into January, the week of the 14th. Okay, and you've got a northwest flow there that's established in the jet stream at this point. You don't have as strong ridging here in the east. You're also showing some sort of vigorous system in the long term moving across the south. So the premise is the same from what we were talking about yesterday. Still trying to see where this ultimately winds up in terms of the upper air pattern. I did, we talked yesterday about the fact that that I think the most important thing that needs to get out of the way is that fire hose Pacific jet. And let's take a look at that. Look at the North Pacific here and look at the upper air. And, this is on the new GFS. So, here we have, look at this. It's just this almost, it's like a ruler that comes across the Pacific. You don't have any real polar flow. It's all, with all these upper lows and trough, this sort of amorphous, gigantic east-west uh, trough that runs from the Pacific North off the Pacific Northwest and going northwestward through Alaska and back over to the Siberia side. You got to clean that up. This is all probably, this is El Nino induced to some degree, and this all has to be cleaned up in order to get it out of the way. And as we at least head out to, I'm not going to expect too much to happen here. You're starting to see some hints of some changes uh, come along the middle of next week. But there's still this almost straight line flow from China. It goes right across into the west coast, but you are beginning to see that. You see how that ridge does pop up into the Pacific, the Rockies, northwestward into northwestern Canada. So that's important. That's an important development because that at least does cut the Pacific jet off to some degree and allows for more of a polar flow to develop into the eastern United States, into the eastern half of the United States. We have to see this actually. We would want to see this progress continue through the forecast period. I'll back up to last night. And I mean, to some degree, it does, you do see some change here going forward into the longer term, especially, as always, it seems to be the most toward the end. We never seem to get, we got to get this thing inside the 10-day time frame. This at least if it does verify would be a much better situation. But a lot of this has got, this Pacific jet has got to go. And the sooner it goes, the better for snow lovers. Now, the Atlantic side, we'll take a look at the Atlantic side here. As I said yesterday, the Atlantic side is a bit more problematic because, you're talking about impacts over a pretty large area of geography, and we at least can acknowledge the fact that, you see the blocking high that's been over England. I'm just going to back it up. I mean, it's been here for quite a while. And it's still there. I mean, it just sits there and actually reforms and re-strengthens as we move toward the 10th of the month. And while that's all happening, you also can see the nature of what's happening here in the eastern part of the U.S. with a trough pulling out and then a new trough diving into the east with a colder flow for the middle part of next week. So the problem with the Atlantic jet is actually, it's more the position of the block than anything else. That blocking high that's sitting over England, we've got to get that. You'd want to get that to break down and rebuild further west, which would suppress the jet in the Atlantic further south and create more of a blocky nature of the atmosphere. Or at the very, one of the things it is doing at the very least by being out there, it is as I've said, it's kind of prevented things from getting too warm and too, let's call it, blowtorch-ish in the east. So we are above average, but it's not crazy. I got to tell you, thinking back, this sort of, if you want to think about winters in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s, the vast majority of them were kind of like this. And it's it's boring a lot of the time with the occasional weather system that wants to come through. But this is kind of how it was on for a large portion of a 30-year period. So that's why I get a little worked up when we, on the regular Facebook. Doesn't happen too much on the YouTube, but on my Facebook lives, when people throw these temper tantrums over it, and they act as if they were somehow, this has been the Arctic and it was taken away from them. It's never been that way and never will be that way. So one last look, while I have the map up, let's give one last look to the new model run. And we'll put the surface on. So you can see here's the warm front for Monday. Then you've got this system for Tuesday night into Wednesday. That might bring some. That's going to probably wind up bringing some snow up to upstate New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and Maine, and in particular Maine, which is it's Maine, and the lake effect machine does get turned on. So if you look at this for the middle and latter part of next week, with that sort of progressively colder shot with each weather front coming through, this one has a little bit more staying power and is a bit colder for the end of the week and into next weekend. And then after that, again, I don't know. We'll see what today's model runs have bring us. One thing I've noticed, by the way, is that the overnight runs, for some reason, seem to be throwing these sort of, when I look at the overnight runs, I kind of go, I'm not overly enthused. Then I come to the daytime runs, and they seem to be a bit more bullish for winter weather going forward. By the way, I'm trying to be unbiased here. I know not everybody likes winter weather, so for me, it kind of doesn't make a difference one way or the other which way it goes. Although with my heart, yeah, I would like to see a little bit of snow and maybe a bit of a stretch of cold weather, as long as I've got firewood to burn. I know it's not going to take a big toll on my heating bill. All right, so I guess that's the upside here for everybody, is that your heating bills are well behaved. So, okay, so we've got this morning David, William, Glenn Thompson, Mahogany, Timothy Veltman, Jason Schaefer. Good morning to all of you. And for those of you who are lurking in the background, good morning to you as well. We're early in the model cycle coming out this morning, so we're just going to have to wait for the whole model run to be done, then wait for the parallel GFS and all the rest of it. But it's slow, it's grinding, it's frustrating, and occasionally you get look at these things, and you get this sort of emotional high that the model spits out a couple of chances for snow events, only to take it away at the next run. And that's why I think, like as I've been saying, in terms of the approach, you just have to kind of sit back and just let it play out, one step at a time. I did talk, a couple of other developments. Some people have been talking about the Southern Oscillation Index, the SOI, and it actually apparently scored a negative reading of -21. I don't know what that means in terms of the scale, other than when the SOI is negative, that's usually a sign of cold and snow in the east. But we'll see. David says the Dr. Cohen talking about that the European is not showing the cold for us. What polar vortex does that model tend to be accurate? Okay, it's sort of new territory in terms of trying, because what we're trying to do here is also, we've got this polar vortex split going on in the stratosphere. Normally, we wouldn't even care about what's going on up there, but well, in a general sense, we care, but we don't care. But since we've kind of hooked it together now. So we've got the polar, the split in the polar vortex, and how's it going to translate at the surface, and how are the models handling all this? The European, the thing with the European is, when it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's really bad. And right now, and it tends to be better more often than not. The problem is that lately, it's just, for quite a while, actually. I think since the last upgrade they did it, the European has been a bit squirrely. So, it also shows it on one run, doesn't show it the next run, shows more of it on one run, less of it on the next run. I think you have to be careful to grab on one particular run of the European model and hold it as gospel going forward, because I still think we're in this volatile process that the models are having with this whole triple split in the polar vortex, and waiting for the pieces to finally get to their ultimate destinations. So look for more of this. Look for model. You're going to have European and other model runs that you're going to look at, and are going to be incredibly exciting. and then you're going to have model runs that follow that are going to be incredibly disappointing from the standpoint of winter weather and snow, if that's if that's what your agenda is. Okay, if you're looking for things to stay the same, you're going to have the opposite perspective. But again, try not to get into that model run after model run roller coaster. You'll just drive yourself crazy if you do. And just take more of the broad trend over the course of a couple of days to see which way we're going. One of the important things about this whole patterns situation is, well, a couple. I keep making this point. The pattern change you want and the pattern change you get are two different things. We can go from the pattern that we've had, which we've had, where nothing much is happening, to going into another weather pattern where nothing much happens, except that it doesn't happen in a different way. So just beware of that. There's no guarantee that this is going to ultimately wind up into anything that is going to remotely satisfy you, depending on what you're looking for. And it's just as much a mystery to me getting there as it is to you. It's always a struggle up here in the Northeast for snow. And cold a little bit less so, but there are times when it pulls out, and there are times when the pattern doesn't favor it. I just, the thing that bothers me is, again, more through all of this is, I get frustrated in watching all this as much as anybody else. It's the temper tantrum nature that folks take on, and then they say things that make absolutely no sense, and that gets me going. It's like, you read some people's comments, and they're along the lines of like, it's never snowed before here, nor would it ever snow again. And I just I don't understand that. I mean, it's just to me, it's childish. If you want to talk to me, talk to me about real points and real questions, and get a sense of spend the time to get a sense of how weather works and how weather patterns work and so on, and that's that. And I think you're learning something at least. You're not spending time jumping up and down and acting like a 5-year-old. Okay, I've ranted enough. I have to hit the road, speaking of which, to get to work. The only change today is the YouTube live stream tonight. Instead of being at 7 o'clock, is going to be at 6 o'clock. Mahogany, what great news is this? Where are you? Hold on. Where are you, Mahogany? Is the closest I can get. Hang on. Where are you? Oh, you had a baby. Oh, congratulations. Good. That's terrific. Congratulations to you. All the best. She had a baby on Tuesday, and she hasn't gone home yet, and she's watching us now. God bless. Enjoy. In my grandson now is coming up on 8 months old. It goes so quickly. He was born back last May, and he's just about 8 months, and he's grown. He's a happy, joyous boy when I've seen him, and he's great, and you'll have a blast. So in between all the sleepless nights, that all goes away eventually. Okay, for sure. Just you work it through. But congrats, and thank you for being here, everybody. Appreciate it. I'm going to shoot for a 6 o'clock live stream tonight because it's a Friday night, and we'll go through all the weather model nonsense as as it all comes in this afternoon. Digest it and see where it takes us later today. I'm sorry, David. I got to start it at 6 tonight. It's just I don't have much choice. It's where my open window is between 6 and 7, as opposed to after 7 o'clock. So you'll come in halfway, okay, and then you have to go back and watch the other half on a replay. Have a great afternoon, everybody. We'll see you later.